is just thinking of reconnection to the senses, right? So you can begin by starting with, what is it that you can taste, feel, touch right now? Simple, nervous system regulation practices as like, butterfly taps, right? Bilateral stimulation of the body with the connection, to the body. What is, even going and holding your hands under running water for a minute, right? And being present with what it feels like. Because, yeah, when we have a newborn baby, we don't have 20 minutes for journaling.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spoil Your Baby podcast. I am delighted to be here today with Mariya Garnet. Mariya is a registered psychotherapist qualifying and the founder of Silver Owl Therapy. Welcome, Mariya.
Hi, Greer. Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Lovely to be together as always. Full disclosure, are friends and we live in the same community and we love to do things together. So this is just another joyful thing to do, to share our work and passions with everyone. So before we get into our topics today, tell us a little bit about yourself. You have a wealth of experience and knowledge to bring to this space. Give us a little info about yourself.
All right. So I have been in mental health and wellness industry for like over 18 years. I am a professional artist as well, a trained artist, and I'm a traditionally trained psychedelic facilitator. And from working with indigenous wellness practices of Peruvian Amazon, I've trained in Western psychotherapy. I'm an expressive art therapist. So I have lots of practices that kind of come from two sides of the world combining together. And my work is very much creative, very much somatic. I work with lots of folks who carry childhood wound traumas, complex PTSD. I work with lots of folks who kind of understand their patterns and know everything about themselves, but have hard time filling the gap between knowing and feeling. And a large portion actually of my practice includes young mothers, new parents, I would say.
Yeah. I feel like so much of that, maybe so much of that reason, I'm sure they're attracted to you for all different reasons. But so I always say that motherhood is the time when we are more aware of our patterns and are more aware of our wounds, and so much comes up, right? Whether that's unconscious or conscious for so many of us. And we want to be able to show up for our babies and ourselves and, I don't know, use this opportunity. We're going to talk about matrescence today. So I always say matrescence is this incredible opportunity because it opens up neuroplasticity in our brains, especially in many of the areas that were formed in our infancies, become, especially able to be reshaped during motherhood. And then we also have the experience of thousands and thousands of repetitions of being there for our baby, being present for big emotions, learning new ways to self-regulate. Our empathy opens up. But there's also all kinds of other things like our threat detection systems and things that are surprising and strange, right? Let's say strange for many of us, new and unusual for many of us. So in that kind of topic of matrescence, what do people experience? Tell us, because I think so many people here, they might know about it, they might not know about it. But for so many mothers that I've always talked to, when as soon as I tell them your brain's massively changed, they're like, oh, that explains everything. But tell us more about what does that look like for people in real life?
Yeah, I think, the understanding that, we are really going through normal developmental shift and really helps to go through it. because pregnancy and postpartum, as you said, involve real structural brain change. We also have, the estrogen and progesterone dropping sharply. So when a mother says she doesn't recognize herself, the brain doing the recognizing has itself changed shape and chemistry. And that puts matrescence closer to adolescence than like a mood dip or anything that and it kind of, I find that when you really share it with women, um there comes like the shame sometimes that comes with that brain fog and not recognizing itself really lifts, and we can normalize it without pathologizing it.
Yeah, because it's
Right.
supposed to happen, right?
Yeah.
It's like, here's the information. This is part of the natural process in becoming a mother, and it can happen if for your second baby, third baby, onwards as well. And it's expected. And actually, society is often telling us, where are you? Where did you go? Come back, get back to yourself really quick, which is just impossible and makes no sense when you understand the brain and the mind. So I agree. I think it's so important for us to hold mothers in that time in
Yeah.
it's supposed to be this way. And
Like
it's
that's
messy.
what nature intended. We are supposed to change, and it's not a symptom to fix. So I think
Yes.
that reframing alone tends to do real work. Like it's
Yes.
not something to fix; it's something to go through and to grow through. Right?
Yeah. A process to trust that
Yeah.
you'll grow, like you said, grow through it and come out with the right support. I would say you come out of it like the most badass you've ever been. You can come out of this with the most healed, the most together, the most confident and healthy that you've ever been because it's such an opportunity for growth. But it is messy. It can be quite messy. So yeah, tell us a bit more about that. Like what do people experience? Like in terms of like the identity change, the mind change, all that kind of stuff.
What's interesting, what I find interesting, that and we can just call it the loss of self, right? The
Yeah.
old self, right?
Yeah.
It happens before we can even catch it, and it can happen before birth, right? It can happen right after the birth. It can happen a year or two even later, right? And uh, before mother can even say, I don't know who I am anymore, her body has already stopped registering its own signals like
Wow.
hunger, fatigue, the urge to move, because attention has been rerouted entirely towards the baby, right? So we um, really kind of experience a disconnection in some ways from our own selves and our own, physical needs, right? Our as Winnicott calls it, primarily maternal preoccupation. It's a relational pool of attention that organizes itself around the baby, right?
And that's very much fought against in modern in the modern world, right? Like not by everybody, but the majority in modern parenting. People are told the opposite. Don't lose yourself. Don't change. Don't put all your focus on the baby. But our biology is doing something different, right?
Well, it's a means of survival, right, for the baby. Like we can look at all of, and I'm definitely oversimplifying it. This is just for kind of general education purposes, but our
Yeah.
whole attachment mechanisms in early childhood, they're all about survival, right?
Yes.
It's so that's also where let's say developmental trauma can also develop when the attachment needs are not being chronically met, right? And our nature, like literally wired our brains and our nervous systems and our bodies for a while to allocate all of our resources to the baby, and that feels like a real loss. Like there is a lot of real grief that comes in, and a lot of modern day culture either tries to fight it, right? Like as you said, don't lose yourself, Or I also sometimes find like flip completely on the other side, right?
Yeah.
So it's really tricky to find that balance, and I often work with clients on either side. Either clients who really fight for their old self, or completely dissolve in the baby. And what I like to remind them, because there's lots of fears that if you're not there all the time for your baby, they will experience trauma. So what I want to bring in here is that we're talking about consistent and regular attachment that includes rupture and good enough repair. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other big missing piece is that we're so often doing that mothering like almost alone. Right. And so that would not have happened in the systems that we're talking about, the way that we evolved, right? It wouldn't be left on one woman to take care of one baby. There would be several support people around. And so there would be other people to be stepping in. So then mom could have more breathing room and more kind of thought for herself, right?
Well, yeah, and that's actually where the couple's nervous system, becomes really important, because co-regulation between partners is physiological. It's not just relational. Our nervous systems entrain under shared stress and sleep deprivation. So once partners' dysregulation measurably raises the other's arousal and heart rate and stress hormone patterns. So that's where your village, your support systems that if you're privileged enough to have, can really help, right?
Yeah.
There is such a thing as nervous system to nervous system co-regulation, right? So the mother can breathe out a little bit, if
Yes.
there is a regulated adult in the room with her, which is sometimes happens.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, I love that. I love that. It's so important. And I talk about this with mothers in my mother's group all the time. We just were talking about this morning, where people are feeling too dysregulated around the people that are supposed to be helping.
Yeah.
Right? And it's so tough because we're all so wounded. We're going to talk about like the attachment wounds that we bring into all this too. It all comes together.
Yeah.
So it's tough. We're in a tough spot with it. Right? And so I wanted to go back to the part where you talk about the mother not noticing her needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not noticing the basic needs and maybe even the secondary needs during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us more, like to what extent is that important? I have my own answer, but like for her to be doing some work to be like bring those into awareness, right? Because mother and baby are so connected. They're the same two nervous systems connected as the other ones you mentioned. And like how can therapy and or having, practices
Yeah.
tie into that?
Okay. Well, just for the purposes of an example, I'll kind of take it to an extreme that, well, extreme, I think a lot of us experienced. Like sometimes even our verbal capacity is gone in postpartum, right? Like
Yeah.
that state where you can't even articulate yourself. So what therapy, right? We're talking about where you don't
You
know
can't
left
even find the
right.
name for like a book, right? Or like you don't know where your keys are and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
So that's where somatic or expressive therapy work really comes in, because even a gesture or scribble, a touch can can really be supportive, and it is still accessible, right? And it's an accessible way back into the body, right? So when we are losing that interoception, right, the felt sense of self, and we're going into exteroception towards the baby, the practice can be reclaim, like bringing ourselves back into ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, when I work with the mothers, we are not looking for an insight or changing your entire kind of internal organization in the moment, because that's not the time. The time is just to feel yourself again. So sometimes in the session it can look very simple, and sometimes I do get comments from my clients saying like, what did we even do? Right, because it can be simple as humming,
Yeah.
right? It can be simple as doing drawing, and mindless drawing, right? Like a mindless, you're in your felt sense. Like I often work, with bilateral drawing, for example, where you have two pencils of two different colors and you just go, in figure eights on the paper, or circles, just remembering the felt sense of self. So that is, I would say, um, that is the beginning of kind of reclaiming yourself and learning what that new you feels like, right?
Mhm, like,
Before you
being
can,
in your body.
yeah.
It's interesting too, that reminds me of, like, more indigenous postpartum practices, like well, firstly, like, people feeding you, and so, like, you're, like, tasting and digesting, and that feels really good, and noticing maybe and people are holding your baby while they're have prepared food and you get fed. But also, like, closing of the bone ceremony, like, postpartum massage, Ayurvedic treatments, Mayan treatments, singing to the mother, around the mother, right? Things like this. That
Yeah,
yeah, that all resonates, right? Is the same kind of
the ceremony and the art has always been part of this ritualistic structures, and yeah, like they're all aimed at like reconnection to senses, right? Smell, touch, hearing, right? They're not there to analyze or, write down the points of, who you are right now, right? It's feeling before, yeah, feeling before thinking.
beautiful. Yeah, well, it just brings up the idea for me of, like, birthing like, the mother's being born, right? And so, the same way we give our babies all this sensory information and stimulation,
It's
the
true, yeah.
newborn mother kind of needs it,
Not
right?
look that way, yes.
Yeah, amazing,
It's such-
amazing. Oh, I love it. So, yeah, matrescence is normal, and our society is really we have to kind of make these things happen for ourselves, right? Whether that's, like, engaging a therapist, being in a group,
Mhm,
calling in, or hiring postpartum specialists to be around us and take care of
mhm.
us, or calling in those, like, loving people in our lives who have some knowledge and things that they can provide. But, a lot of it does have to be us, right? You mentioned, like, the humming and bilateral drawing, like, those are really lovely practices that could be led by a therapist, but also a mother could do on her own.
Mhm.
Any others that someone could take away from this as sort of an entry point to start kind of practicing feeling being in their new body? I mean, those ones are lovely. If you would even just expand on those would be great.
Yes, and I think an easy way of thinking about it is just thinking of reconnection to the senses, right? So you can begin by starting with, what is it that you can taste, feel, touch right now? Um, Simple, nervous system regulation practices as like, butterfly taps, right? Bilateral stimulation of the body with the connection, to the body. What is, even going and holding your hands under running water for a minute,
Yeah.
right? And being present with what it feels like. Because, yeah, when we have a newborn baby, we don't have 20 minutes for journaling.
Nope.
But yes, I guess, if we wanted to think of something that we can do on the go, is just remember the senses, come back to your senses, all right?
Mhm.
So,
That's
and
such a great tip.
explore opportunities at any given moment, and it's bringing awareness and attention into those senses. What am I hearing, right? What am I feeling? What does the temperature feel like? Again, they don't sound really deep, but they do have a profound effect because you start listening to your body. And when you start listening to your body, it speaks back.
Beautiful. Yeah. And we do need that reminder because I think modern motherhood just puts us into fight, flight, freeze. We're really, really sympathetic, activated. And if we do pay attention to those little moments throughout the day, we're like letting out the steam a little bit throughout the day. We're kind of coming back to some regulation, noticing our breath, noticing what's going on and possibly, regulating.
Oh, yes. And here we're talking about early postpartum because we can also go into what happens down the line, right? Because new parts show up after birth and old attachment history gets loud again, right?
Yep.
So that's where once we kind of regain a little bit more of our own capacity, because we talked about how feeling, not analyzing how somatic therapy is really supportive early on, but there will be also so much more other historic material coming up,
Yeah.
right? That they're really the motherhood gives us an opportunity to process our early attachment trauma as well a little bit.
Yes.
Usually it comes up for mothers when their kids are around, like maybe around 2 years old, older, younger. So that's when we can look at separating the protector tracking real threat like a newborn's actual vulnerability from the protector rooted in her unresolved history, right?
Yeah, I hear this so much from parents as well, and I agree. I feel like I would say that what a such a huge message is take this opportunity of matrescence to heal these heal the attachment wounds that you may have, or even just however you want to say it, the attachment patterns, the wounds, the survival mechanisms that
Attachment
you
history.
created,
We
the
can call it
history.
attachment history.
Exactly. We don't want we're not judging it. It is. And it does come up. Can you tell us more about how the attachment history comes up in those years? And I find that too, because like you said, around 2 is like the tantrums are more, the needs are really high. You've been taking care of a baby for 2 years already. It's been, it's been a long road and
Okay,
all of this stuff comes
yeah.
together.
I can talk about it all day because that part is actually my wheelhouse, the attachment and developmental trauma. And the way we were parented is going to show up in how we parent, because our um, like those that attachment history gets activated, especially when we are under stress, because that's where we resolve to our mm, to our adaptive strategies, how we have adapted to our childhood. Because yeah, when everybody's calm and regulated and well rested and slept, right, we can be in our best selves, right?
Yes.
But that's not what parenting is. Parenting is a lot of pressure, lots of stress, and when we don't have a lot of resources, we go back into the ways that have been recorded in our nervous system and our bodies. So if a woman's own early attachment was insecure, parentified, or unpredictable, mothering her own child pulls those patterns back to the surface, often as overfunctioning or falling with a partner or her own parents.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So many of the mothers in this community are in that situation, right? So many people are here because they're like, I I can identify that my attachment history, to say it in, neutral. I can identify it. I know what happened and I want something different for my baby. But sometimes that's really hard because when you're under stress, I found this in my own parenting too, the voice of like the historical voice comes through you and you're like, whoa, that's not that I didn't choose to say that. That just came out. Like, whoa, what is that?
Yeah.
How do we deal with this?
Wow, why am I my own mother right now?
Yep.
But yeah, because early attachment patterns are stored as like implicit procedural memory encoded before, parts of our brains were fully online in infancy, and becoming a caregiver puts a woman back into a relational structure, dependency, closeness, physical vulnerability that closely resembles her own earliest template. And so the nervous system pattern matches to that old learning rather than the present moment. Right. So that's why a reaction to her own baby's needs can suddenly feel like out of proportion, but oddly familiar. Right.
Yes. Yes. And so that I feel like if someone is overwhelmed with that, that would be a time to be getting some support with it, right? You can't really do that on your own.
Right. And often, like many of us have been brought, with the rules were different for children. So we are now can sometimes watch our children, do something that like you have a memory, like you were never allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And he
Some people
react,
weren't allowed to cry, right? So
yeah,
seeing a child in their full expression of crying is like,
is
"What is
difficult.
this?"
It's
Yeah.
very difficult, and we can understand, in our cognitive minds, that it's okay, but our body just reacts, right? Like it's hard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So if someone is feeling like that, what would be a place for them to do, you think, to get some
Yeah,
help
this
and
is
support?
yeah, that's definitely that's where a lot of work can be done because again, when we drop into those old patterns, like you can frame it as kind of like our childhood consciousness is acting at that moment, right? Yet, as adults, in theory, right? Not everybody gets there, but we can develop enough present moment capacity to stay connected to self while the
Yeah.
old material is activated. So it's about widening, our ability to hold difficult emotions without being overwhelmed, without being, without collapsing. And it is, it's also like it's a slow work. It's also nervous system work. It is somatic in that way. Um, and it involves, sitting with unprocessed grief, unprocessed anger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm hearing I teach in my book and other and elsewhere as well, just try to, I say, grow space in those moments. And so you can, like you said, try to stay present, try to step away, regulate, sing, move,
Yeah.
mobilize, use the stress. But that is a bit of a that is, that can work over time and that can grow over time, but it is a little bit of a what to do in the moment,
Right.
which is totally fine. So for anyone who's feeling that now, try that. But I think the other message you're saying is really important is that with therapeutic road,
Mhm.
you can heal it on a much deeper level, right? Yeah.
Because we do have access to agency, right? We can widen that, circle of tolerance, right? If you may, to like, as Gabor Mate says, it's not about feeling better, it's about getting better at feeling. So we can still, because, seeing your child cry, it will never be easy, right? But we can hold that not easy moment again without reverting to old strategies, right?
Yes, definitely. I feel like you just described my progression. And I will say I was in therapy throughout my entire son's infancy, and it really made a huge difference in all of that too, and, working with my younger parts and things like that. And I also say to people as well, like, you know, so many things are costly and expensive in these years, but it is also this really incredible critical window where you can experience massive change. And that's not to say that if you don't engage in therapy until your children are older or, whatever, you'll still make great changes, but you really have this super powered brain of neuroplasticity in this window. And when you do, you're going to get these benefits and then your baby's going to get the benefits too, right? Because you'll be able to be there more.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity because those patterns are really visible, right? So you can really work with what's present in the now, because the later you go on, we tend to organize our lives, not to be activated to trigger it. So it might
Yeah.
at some point later just feel like, well, I don't have any problem.
Yeah,
Yet,
smart.
yet for some reason, I have no connection, right? To
Yes. I also
others.
always say that too, like the early motherhood and fatherhood period, you can't make it easy for yourself. Like, you can't run away from this. You can't, use all your old coping mechanisms and avoidance and the stuff, because your baby is there in front of you and they're bringing this stuff up, right? They're holding a mirror up to all of
Exactly.
these things. So why not? Why
Exactly.
not do that work then? So wonderful. Well, Mariya, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Where can people learn more about your work and find you and things like that?
Well, first of all, they can find me through your website. I'm under somatic therapy there,
Yeah,
so they can book a session. They can also, I am on Instagram as Maria Garnet,
beautiful.
Mariya Garnet as a stone. And if you just look for silverowltherapy.ca, you'll find my psychotherapy practice. And, I'm open to conversations, consults, chats.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. We'll put up all of the links and we'll have you back here maybe in a few months. Thanks,
Love
Maria.